I have found more joy and confidence as I have learned to receive guidance from God and act on it over and over and over again in little ways and big ways in every domain of my life. And I think that's where the joy comes in that I was missing for a long time.
The Now That We're a Family podcast.
All right, Jessica Jackson, I tell you what, thank you for taking the time to sit and talk with us today. I am not one, believe it or not, I am not one to find too much enjoyment from women blogs or from mother blogs or websites. And I found myself thoroughly enjoying your website, Thriving in Motherhood, and even the little bit of content that I've been able to consume of yours, because you really are a systems and a processes, in my mind, process person. And I guess being an entrepreneur, being somebody that really wants to optimize this different aspects of my life, I felt like you were speaking a language that is really unique in the motherhood space. And it really resonated with me. And I know Katie's spoken very highly of you. So I'm really excited to be able to share a lot of your insights with our audience, and just to kind of like direct them more and more to your resources. But with all that said, thanks for being here. Can you, in your own words, do maybe a quick introduction? Let us know, who you are, where you live. Do you have kids? Are you married? What is it that you're doing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a mom of 4 kids. Fifth is going to be here in July. My husband and I have been married for almost 14 years, and I homeschool all of our kids. And then the Thriving Motherhood podcast started as like a way to use sound recording skills that I did in college. It's just something fun for me, like 7 years ago. And I also started because I was not thriving in motherhood. I was severely like surviving, and you wouldn't know it. Like I've always something that's like very determined and trying to figure things out. And so I figured if I started a podcast, I could interview moms that seem to be joyful, seem to have it figured out, seem to know what they were doing, and start to try and, I don't know, glean what I was missing, why I wasn't feeling the joy. And so that has grown into a business. I had zero intention of it being anything like that. But that's kind of what we do. We spend a lot of time outside. We grow a lot of our food. We go on walks every day, and then spend many hours reading books together. And my kids have an endless supply of creative projects that they're constantly doing that as they get older now, I'm helping them to manage and provide materials for and support them in that. So that's kind of my life in a nutshell.
That's awesome. And as I was looking through, excuse me, your website, your Surviving to Thriving Toolkit, right? Is that what you are calling your beta program?
Yeah.
Did you get it right? Yeah. I was like, I need this. You have so many things in there that caught my eye that I wanted to know more about. I'm hoping to, kind of get a little peek behind the scenes for our listeners today, because you're in beta right now. The program's currently closed, or I would have gotten it this afternoon, because I just am feeling like I want that fresh insight into, just motherhood. And we can always refine and get better. Elisha mentioned entrepreneurialism, and I feel like that has a lot to do with motherhood. Like both have to be you have to be self-managed in order to do a good job. No one's waking you up in the morning saying, hey, do your job well. So I'm kind of curious. You mentioned in there the difference between surviving and existing. That caught my eye. And I was curious if you could tell me more. What's that difference?
Yeah. So for me, existing, I have been in many seasons where my health has been to the point where really I'm just a person in the room. I cannot do any of the things. I can't cook and clean and take care of my children in the way that I would like to. And so it requires a different set of skills. And that's what the toolkit really is. Like every phase is different skills. So in that existing phase, I did all of this really badly first. I've had so many opportunities to get better at this. I did it so badly at first. And I would often feel so guilty that I'm just like a wet rag in the room. And so not only am I not doing things, I'm also just like bringing down everybody around me, and I'm feeling guilty. And then that's causing me to act poorly. And I learned that actually, if I can just learn to smile and be kind and give hugs and say thank you and show gratitude for the people that are helping me, mostly my husband, okay, a lot of my husband, and just be really grateful and acknowledge what they're doing, then there is a lot of joy and confidence that can come even when I can't do the things that I want to do and the way that I want to do them. Now, survival mode, I would say, is when life is bigger and I've dropped the systems, and yet there's still things that I've got to stay on top of. Life is still progressing, and somehow with either, lower capacity than the circumstances are calling for, we need to find a way through. And so that's like an entirely different skill set and a bunch of different systems that I put in place for that. So for me, that's really the difference between surviving and existing.
Okay. So in surviving, it's when circumstances are calling you to have to do things. How do you find leverage to leverage your limited time and energy to be able to get those things done?
Yeah. Or even again, just navigate them with grace, even when you're not going to be able to leverage. Like sometimes things are just coming at you. It doesn't look pretty at all, right? And we're just trying to make it through the day. And I don't love those seasons, but they do exist. And so survival is like, we're not thinking leverage, we're thinking management.
Okay, that's good. That's a good distinction there.
Yeah, I like how you use words like tools, like systems, and even kind of going back to the genesis of your podcast. The mindset that was there to me is really inspiring because often I think we approach parenting far differently than we or housekeeping, whatever it may be, family life. We approach it differently than how we would approach other things in our life, where we don't go look for solutions. We go and look for people to commiserate with, and we don't go and look for experts and people that are thriving. We go and look for people that will validate us doing poorly. And I know that's not across the board, but that does seem to be a lot of the family space. Whereas you had this mindset of, wait a second, people seem to be thriving. I'm going to go talk to them, versus I'm struggling here. I'm going to go find some people that make me feel better about struggling. And I'm curious, with that mindset, I was looking at your journals, your planners. To me, they are very tactical and practical, but they also highlight the necessity for walking with the Lord. We live a life of faith. We seek him for our fulfillment, for our sustenance. We have our being in him. How did you kind of, for lack of a better term, marry those two things of walking with the Lord, but also being very practical, especially in regards to creating your journal and your planner? And what are the differences between your journal and your planner?
Sure. Well, the story behind the planner is after my second child was born, I contracted something called C. diff. It's a superbug and that attacks your colon. And we didn't know it at the time that that's what was going on, because after you have a baby, there's all sorts of wacky things that can happen. And so the doctors just kind of like put me off and said, oh, try this thing or try that thing. It's probably not a big deal. And what happened is 2 weeks postpartum, I woke up one morning and I just felt like God was screaming, go to the ER now, go to the ER now. And so I went, and they took one look at me and they're like, you're going to isolation. You have something very dangerous. And that I stayed there for a week, fighting for my life. And during that time, I just was, a lot of that time, I was just existing, like less than existing, barely cognizant of what was happening around me. But it was a solid 4-month recovery process to like try and kick this thing. And once I left the hospital, and during that time, I just was so aware that I had been I just been like burning time the first 2 years of motherhood with this toddler, and now toddler, and now I had 2 kids, and I was tired of it. I had these ideas, like I had been reading books, I had been listening to podcasts, and so I started having an idea of like, okay, this is the kind of mom I want to be. I think I want to homeschool. I think I want to do these things, but I didn't have a way to like put them into practice. And so while I was in bed with a newborn and my toddler and really, really sick and just like trying to fill those hours of existing, I started looking at every single motherhood planner on the market, thinking, okay, I need a way to take this idea, this what I now call a vision, and make it a reality. Like, how do I take something nebulous and turn it into something practical every, day and week and actually make progress on that? And so I couldn't find it, but I grabbed a notebook instead, one of those dotted journals, and I spent 3 years just kind of designing the system for me. Again, no intention of ever sharing it with anybody. To find like a puzzle, like the puzzle pieces, everything in my brain would need a home to systematically move forward. And so for me, that's really just like what my planner was able to help me do. It was able to take these ideas of the kind of person I wanted to be and move them forward. Anyway, and then the journal came a few years later. We now have moved across the country. My husband finished grad school, and he started a postdoc in Connecticut, and we are even further away from family now. We were never close to family, but now we're like 35 hours away instead of 24 hours away. And I had these 3 little kids, and we were only there for 9 months. And during those 9 months, I dislocated my shoulder because I had a baby and a baby carrier going on a nature hike with my 3 kids and slipped, and the extra weight just like popped my shoulder right out of the socket. And then I had, so 5 months of physical therapy after that. And then I had a miscarriage. And then that created a problem. And I ended up having hernia surgery 2 weeks before we moved again to the South, to Georgia. So that was all in 9 months. And so my mental health, like, hit a low point. And again, like, I don't know that I would have used those words at that time, but looking back, that is absolutely what happened. And I had, at the same time, I'd been reading, because for years I'm like, why don't I feel joy? Like, I'm doing the things. Why don't I feel joy? So I had been reading books like Positive Psychology and the High Performance Habits and the Happiness Advantage and then scriptures, right? And like, and spiritual leaders. And so the journal, so I just knew there was like these research back questions that would help. And so for a long time, I'd like write down my list of questions, and I'd write it in my journal, like just handwrite everything out. And that just became really cumbersome. So I was never consistent with it. And that's when we kind of had this idea to put it into the actual journal so that it was just easy to open and go. So really, it just helped me get through some of these really hard seasons for me and connect me to God and what matters, and do the gratitude and the big wins and, you know, just the research stuff, just in a really systematized way to be accessible. So yeah, everything, it just like, Katie, I admire you so much. I love the Get It All Done Club. I love that you talk about not having like really experienced major depression or, you know, like good health and all these things. But like, I am the opposite end of the spectrum, like so messy in my motherhood. But so that's where a lot of these things come from, is just the mess. And as far as marrying God into it, like, I don't know how to separate it, to be honest. Like if I'm being totally honest, my day starts with scriptures and prayer and receiving ideas from him. Like I believe that a lot of my creativity is like, yes, I put in a lot of research, but I think he does a lot with the information to help put the puzzle pieces together and help me understand things. And what I just love is that I feel like he's given me a process that I get to use to receive ideas from him and execute it. But I don't think I don't think my life is what anyone else's life should look like. But I think that they also can get their own ideas from God and execute it. Right. And so for me, I don't know. I just think I have found more joy and confidence as I have learned to receive guidance from God and act on it over and over and over again, in little ways and big ways, in every domain of my life. And I think that's where the joy comes in that I was missing for a long time.
Wow, that's so encouraging, Jessica. And I love too. That's why I think your systems and your processes and your thoughts resonate so much, because every single mother, you know, you mentioned, you know, oh, good health, or, you know, all these things, but it's like, has those moments of messy motherhood. And it might be a long season, like your 9-month season. I do not know how you walk through that. Like, it's by God's grace alone, right? Like, that's incredible. And some seasons are very long for some women, and some women do get those seasons in shorter amounts, but we all get those seasons where either health is bad or life's just, the Lord's allowing way more than what we are capable of doing in our own strength. And so I think reading through the list of phases and the different things that you teach women was just resonating so much with me, because we're really coming out of a messy season right now. And I just think it's so powerful for other women. And I guess I have been curious about this for a long time, because knowing a little bit more of your story and your health struggles, and then looking at your website that is just like incredible. Like, how do you do it all? Like honestly, like a day in your life. Okay. How does this happen? How do you homeschool your children and support your husband and run a podcast and a business? Cause like with us, like Elisha does most of it. How do you do this?
Well, so I've been doing this for 8 years. So slow and steady, bit by bit, right? Like, I'm not as far as a lot of people in this journey, right? Because I do it in little bits. So that's first of all. Second of all, I'm really like disciplined about when I work and when I don't. And so anytime any money has come into the business, the very first thing I do is pay other people to do everything I don't have to do. So like on a very practical level, has there been huge financial returns for us personally on this business yet? No. But is it still going? Yes, it is. And it will continue to grow. So that's been my priority, is outsourcing as much as I can. And then I just feel like for me, it's playing. So like, this is play for me. So when I'm doing something for myself, this is what I'm doing. And that works, and it charges me. And so when I've talked to my husband about like, well, maybe I should scale back, or maybe I shouldn't do this, he's like, are you kidding? You are way happier after you do X, Y, and Z. Like don't do that. So we've just always been really open, and I've started it really simple. It was like, I'm going to podcast for 1 year, and that was it. That's all I did. And then we would say, let's evaluate and see what we think. And it was like, I really like this, And so every year it's just been adding a little bit more and a little bit more. And typically I master the podcast, so I delegate that, that element. And so then I pick up another thing. And so I don't know. I just work when I want to work. I delegate when I can, and I just go slower than the average person. And that's okay. I figured this is God's journey of personal development for me. And if other people are blessed by it, that's amazing, and I'm so grateful. But I think he just has used it as a tool to teach me how to manage things better at home and to motivate me to figure things out so that we can keep going. And then as my kids get older, I think they feel so proud of me, which I wouldn't expect, but they love seeing what I'm doing, and it inspires them to go create and do things on their own, not on the computer. We've got pretty locked down, but in their own domains in life. And so, anyway, I just see a lot of good coming from it for us and our family circumstances. And also, I think because we homeschool, like I'm not spending hours in the car driving kids around. Like a lot of people think, oh, you homeschool, so how on earth? And I'm thinking, I spend hours at home not doing the things you guys are doing in the car. So I get a lot of hours that way too. There's just a lot of puzzle pieces that can be shuffled around this way.
Yeah, I know we just moved. Where we moved from was right next to an elementary school, and on my morning runs, it always blow me away how early parents were lined up to drop their kids off, and then in the afternoon I drive by and they're lined up, to pick them up, and I'm thinking, man, it's a huge time commitment just when you're sending your kids to public school. You've mentioned a few things about time, like time frames. We've used the word seasons. You talked about that 1 year commitment to something. I just watched one of your videos on your quarterly review. And I mean, I'm with you too, just kind of going from Q1 to Q2 is a really fun time. Can you talk to us, maybe our audience, and how you view time blocks and time chunks? Because actually you said it kind of, in passing, I'm just going to do this for a year. Well, that's actually a pretty long time to stick with something. And so how do you break down time frames from that 1 year to quarterly to sometimes time frames that you don't have control of when it's like a health thing, a season where it's just extended? How do you manage time in that regard?
Well, let's see. That was a big question about time. So let me see where we start. So as far as like goals go or things, I believe firmly in giving ourselves permission to explore and try things without committing to the end result or like a specific outcome. So like that 1 year on the podcast, that's where I got that. It also applies like if you want to try soccer for a season, you commit to a season of soccer, right? See what it goes, gather data, see what you like. So as far as those timeframes go, I think it doesn't have to be a year. It can be 3 months, it can be 6 months, it can be a semester of school, of just giving ourselves permission to try things and get data and see what happens. When it comes to making actual like plans as far as time goes in my life, I never plan more than 90 days ahead because that's a joke. Like I would not even know what's happening 90 days from now. And so typically it's like, I have an idea, a pretty good target of where I want to be in 90 days. And then I am really intentional about selecting what I'm going to focus on the next 30 days. And then that trickles down to what I'm going to do in a week. And then as far as date, like hours go in a day, it's like, I wake up in the morning before 7 is my time. 7 to 1 is family time. This is Katie, your interviews with your mom. So I have an amazing mother. Amazing. But she raised us in public school. So when you're doing those interviews with your mom, I was like hanging on her every word. I'm like, this is what I want to do. I want to homeschool my kids and I want to do it for a long time. Because do you know how many, there's like, I'm sure you do. There are so few women who have homeschooled their children all the way through long term and we're happy, Right. And so finding that example, like I hung on her every word and I felt so validated because I took a nap every single day. And for so long, I felt guilty about that. And then I realized, no, actually, God probably taught us both to take a nap every day. That's brilliant. Okay. I'm going to keep doing that. Like that was so validating for me. And I just like, I was so grateful for that. And then afternoon, we're back to like practical life stuff, you know, making the dinner and doing the chores and getting outside some more. Yeah, and then bedtime, and then I'm not working. I typically don't work in the evening. That's when I spend time with my husband. So, yeah, and quiet time I'll work too. So those are just, I don't know. If it fits in that time, we do it. And if it doesn't fit in that time, it gets bumped to another day.
Yeah, that is such a freeing perspective to be like, okay, I have 90 days. And I love your perspective because it's very, like you said, it's disciplined, but it's also grace filled because it's just like, hey, I'm going to move the ball forward every day as much as I can. And then when the day's done, the day's done. And I just think that's what the Lord calls us to. We put so many deadlines or timeframes or things on ourselves. And, you think of like Abraham and Isaac is the like classic example where it's just like, or an extreme example, I should say, where God's timeline was just totally different. And sometimes just like plodding along instead of trying to do everything right now, right this minute. It's just so much healthier in the long run and so much more sustainable. Like take a nap and enjoy your kids, instead of trying to pack everything into one day and then resent it at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm
I
going to
still
say
do that too sometimes, though, just to be clear. I'm not perfect.
No one's perfect.
well, something that stood out to me in kind of the language on your website, and I think as kind of like the introduction to some of your different products, is you are intentional in measuring progress. That's something I think that's why I resonated with it. Is that's a huge thing that I do at the quarterly coaching I go to at strategic coach and Dan Sullivan. When did you start doing that? And I would say that is a key ingredient to just keep going, is to actually see that you have made progress. There's nothing more. I think things that take us off progress are not acknowledging that progress is happening, right? And you abandon ship. Whereas if you were to actually stop, you'd realize you were doing pretty well. So when did you start doing that? And how do you kind of implement that into your tools and resources?
Yeah. So the very first time I ever went back and celebrated and measured my progress, I was pregnant with our third child. It was an excruciating pregnancy. Like everything about it was so hard, mentally, physically, emotionally. I just felt like I was squeezed, like every element of me was squeezed. And so I had heard on a podcast with Oprah Winfrey, I believe, or maybe it was a coach that had worked with Oprah Winfrey, made this comment about how they pay thousands and thousands of dollars to have them sit down and write down what they did the last 30 days. And then they feel so much better. And I was like, well, if it works for those fancy rich people, this is like it would have been 2016, I was listening to this. And so I grabbed my two little, my 3-year-old and 1-year-old, and we went to our, 4-foot by 3-foot porch. And I handed them crayons and a piece of paper, and I grabbed a notebook and I wrote down everything that I could think of that I had done for I did 2 months because I was been in morning sickness and experiencing that really intensely. And so I had thought all I'd done was lied on the couch and grown a baby and changed diapers. And you know what? I hadn't. I'd actually done a fair amount of things. And so from that month on, I've been addicted to doing 30-day reviews. And even still, all of these years later, I still come in thinking, man, I didn't really do much this month. And at the end, I'm like, wow, I crushed it. I'm awesome. This is amazing. Life's great. And so, yeah, I'm a big believer on the tracking progress. It's essential.
That is so cool. Because like you said, yeah, you mentioned so many people spend thousands of dollars a month to do these simple things, and they are life-changing. And yeah, it's kind of crazy. Okay, you talk about the principle of the loaves and the fishes. What do you mean by that? The title caught my eye. I wanted to know more.
So, okay, this pregnancy, this is the nice thing about being in survival mode all the time. God has a lot of opportunities to teach you things. So, this pregnancy, I kind of like gave up for a while. My heart rate, anytime I was vertical for probably 6-8 week time, was like spiking to 116. So I was just flat most of the day, on top of the regular symptoms. That was a curveball I wasn't expecting. And, so like, I kind of gave up. I was like watching old TV shows something I never do, right? Like just like blast, like just wasting time basically. And, I didn't know what else to do. And I just I don't know, what morning sickness is like. It's rough sometimes. So, I was talking with a family member, on the phone and just kind of told him how I'd kind of given up. And she's like, Jessica, hello. you got to give God something to work with. Like, you got to give him something. And I was like, you're right. And so it just brought to that meat, like that story of the loaves and the fishes, right? Like all this little boy had was a few loaves of bread and a few fishes. And that was enough. That was more than enough, actually. And so I just have in this season set out every day, what is a loaf and a fish that I can give to God today? And let's see what he does with it. And I've lived that way in the past, but like I have been astounded. It's been miraculous at what God has been able to do with the little bit that I give him each day. And I feel like he has taught me and instructed me how to be able to give even more than I think is possible and do even more with that too.
Wow.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Gave me chills.
Yeah.
So that's such a cool perspective to have. Like God could have just fed everybody out of nothing, but he didn't. He wanted something to work with.
Yeah. And on a very practical note, just, that because when you are in a season of overwhelm, everything seems too big. But when you can make that tiny commitment, we talk about like the impetus to our miracle morning is only committing the night before to getting up and taking a drink of water, right? That's the only commitment that you have, and how often that starts the snowball effect. But it reminded me of that when you were saying it, where you were just like, I'm just going to do this tiny thing. And the Lord, through the way he does things, can turn that into so much more. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have another question. You have so many fun things up there. I really want to encourage people to go check out that toolkit that you have created, because I know it's in beta and it's like not available to everybody, but the waitlist is open, right?
Yes.
Okay, because I feel like people need to get on that, because there are so many different things that are just going to hit home with motherhood. In your family systems vault on there, you talk about your get ready bins. Can you tell us about your get ready bins? I want to hear about it.
This is a loaves and fishes moment. When I talk about creating things with God, this was it. So we have lots of people use a bathroom. And so as their bodies have gotten bigger, they don't all fit in said tiny bathroom anymore, meaning teeth brushing and hairbrush was like all over the house, like all everywhere. You would just never know. And so we were spending, I felt like hours a night and way too much energy just trying to hunt down the hairbrush and the toothbrush. And then my other, older kids' deodorant now, like, where's that? All these really nice essential life things. And so one day I went to the store and bought bins for each child, and we put labels on them. And then and I bought them a full, like up to this point, we'd been sharing hairbrushes. We've been sharing a lot of things. And I said, never, never again. So we labeled everything. Everyone has a labeled toothbrush and hairbrush and I don't know, whatever it is, everything in their bins. And now it doesn't matter which bathroom they go in. They can take their bin with them. They can put the bin back. Everything stays together. Friction gone. We have excellent get ready bin systems now. And I don't need checklists anymore or it's like, because the environment set up, that works for adults, it works for kids too. Because the environment set up, they just take care of themselves now. Like no prodding needed, no reminders needed. They just know where things are and they go take care of it.
Wow.
That's great. Yeah. It's like go through the tools in your get ready bin, and then you're ready.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that how it's movable too, so that you could take it into a different bathroom. And it's not like built into the bathroom, because I can see that being, people just grabbing stuff out of the bin and then running it into another room or something if it wasn't movable.
Yeah, because typically we're using drawers or like cabinets in the bathroom, and you can't take that with you. And then a lot of times when you create like a kit like that, this is like a go bag. This is like a go bag for.
And then we created the go bag version for traveling, and it's amazing because now it's like duplicated. Well, I created a get ready bin in a bag that's separate. And so like, it was great. I was dead. I could not travel. I was so sick. There was a funeral across the country, and the kids found out and had to fly with my husband in like 2 days. And I could not move. I had the heart rate thing. And I was like, guess what? Toiletries are packed. You just need to add clothes. And they grabbed the go bags, and each one had their own. Everything's labeled same. And then they were ready for a trip, or we can go camping, or we can go to the state park over the weekend, or anything.
So what do you put in these bags? Does each child have their own bag then?
Yeah, same thing. Toothbrush, hairbrush, deodorant. Like, we just created a duplicate system for any trips we want to take really quick.
Wow. And where do you store those? Do you like hang them in the garage or put them in a bin?
No, I have it. So we travel, those like Rubbermaid 3-drawer systems that are clear. We travel with 2 of them, and each kid gets 1 drawer for their clothes. And then that leaves 1 extra drawer for the bags.
Okay.
Okay, nice.
So it's just always in there, ready to go.
Yeah, you're talking about how you're always dead and on the couch, and somehow you're managing to do more than like anybody I know.
Well, but
You're
this is
incredible.
where like long game comes in, right? Like 12 years of motherhood taking baby steps. That's what this gets you, right?
Nice.
Well, if you're intentional in learning and taking action and thinking and praying like you have been,
Yeah.
because it can also get you nowhere. So I think, yeah, it says a lot about what you've done. Okay, I wanted to know too about kitchen cups. You just put on there kitchen cups is a bullet point, and I was like, I need to know. Tell me about the kitchen cups.
They're just metal cups with a silicone ring with a magnet on it, and each kid has one. Okay, so before this point, it was incredible. It didn't matter if the thing was a cup or not. My kids were drinking out of it. So at the end of the day, there was like so many drinking things all over the kitchen and the table, but also outside and in every room of the house. Even though we have this rule about not taking things everywhere, they still went. So we just got rid of, well, actually, everything got lost, and I replaced them with each kid has a metal cup with a metal ring and a magnet. And so their cups just stay on the fridge or on the table or on the fridge.
On the fridge. Okay, so wait, they clip to the fridge?
It's just metal. It's just got like a magnet in it. And so it just is magnetized to the fridge. And the rings are colored. So each kid knows their color. And then that's it. That's all they drink out of. And then they have a water bottle for their bedroom or out and about.
Wow.
I've never heard of clipping a cup to the fridge.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Well, it works. It's an Amazon find. It works.
That's great.
Man, yeah, I didn't know that technology was legal here in the States, but I think we should look into that.
Well, I am in the South.
There you go. I hear in your language and through your examples and stories, these things that you've been able to quantify as being wins. And when I think of, running a home, and Katie and I are very aligned in wanting our home to do well. Like we want our home to thrive. We want it to function well. And that's going to look different in each and every home. And as a result, I think it's incumbent upon, fathers and mothers to decide for themselves what winning looks like. Be like, okay, wait a second. We've got neighbors to the left and to the right. We've got friends at church. And winning, it's going to look different. And so we need to establish that, but then also realize that that's going to change throughout different seasons as well. What's that conversation been like with your husband as your children have grown old? You've got children that are older than our children as they've grown. Is that like a quarterly by quarterly conversation? Is that an annual conversation? Or is it just like a fluid everyday conversation where you're saying like, this is what winning looks like. This is the direction we're heading in?
I think typically those conversations are prompted because things feel like they're not winning. And so we then have an many conversations, typically trying to course correct and figure out what's off and what we can do about it. I don't know that we are, besides doing an annual conversation about like, hey, this is what I've kind of come up, this is my vision. Hey, this is what you're working on. This is your vision. These are your goals. I think we're just very much more like in the moment. And I think instead of looking at winning, I don't think we use that language in this situation. We're not talking about why we're winning. We're talking about why we're losing and what can we do about it. So we both have a background in technology and engineering education. So for me, like training on problem solving, like that's deep in my like college days roots. That was like my favorite class in college was the problem solving class. And so I think for me, just that I'm just like wired in my brain of what is the actual problem? What's the root of the problem here? And how can we solve it? And so I think when things feel like they're not winning, we're just trying to get to the root of why and then solve that.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Everyone needs to take that class in college.
Yeah.
It
was really fun
in
too.
high school.
Yeah.
Like talk about a life skills class, like identify the root. Like it's that way in relationships. So often we like cannot identify the root of the problem. And so we're just stuck up here addressing a problem that's not even a problem. Yeah, that's just more profound than what you might think. Okay. So I'm curious, you have all these incredible systems. You're in the Get It All Done Club. We didn't talk about this before, but I've loved having you there. You've been there for a long time.
I think I was like one of the first early adopters.
An early adopter.
Club. Yeah. Whatever it's, I don't know what you say, early joiner, quick supporter, very excited.
I was really excited when I saw you in there because I knew that you already were doing this as well. We were kind of creating these things simultaneously. I think you probably were actually creating before I was. And so I am curious though, has there been any takeaway? We didn't talk about this before, but anything that you have enjoyed about the Get It All Done Club? You mentioned my mom's
let me
interviews.
tell you. So I think the Get It All Done Club and what I do is totally different. Katie, I love your stuff because you come from a principle of thriving. Like you do. And there's these things that you've done that I'm like, that is so obvious. I wish I had known that. Like things, even like your boundaries of the kids can't clean up forts, so they can't build forts. Like,
Oh,
really?
yeah.
You know, now for us at this point, like that's a core identity. Like our kids build forts and they don't clean them up, right? It's just like that's what they do. And our house looks very creative. We're working on it. We're trying to build the skills to match the level of creativity. But like if I could go back, I would love to implement a lot of these things that just like cut out so much grief in my life. So I think that plus you just gather in, you have all of these women that you have interviewed in there and just really help, I don't know, disciple, minister to, teach, you know, us as the next generation. And that is worth its weight in gold, to gain wisdom from others that have gone before us. And so that's really common in the business space, but it's less common in the motherhood space. And so anytime I see anyone in the next generation teaching, I am there. Like, tell me whatever you can. And then you just grew up differently than I did, right? And so I love learning from your family culture and the things that you bring to it. And yeah. So yeah, you have so much wisdom in the Get It All Done Club and have also curated women in there as well to help really encourage. So I love what you do.
Oh, thanks so much. That honestly means a lot, especially after seeing your website. I was like, I am intimidated. I need to sign up for Jessica. And I do. I really want to be in your program. So hopefully once it comes off beta, I can go through because as you can see, I mean, I pick like 6 things here and you have, I don't know. Do you know how many things you talk about in there? It is dozens and dozens.
I didn't count. They say that doesn't matter in marketing.
Yeah, exactly. No one cares. They just read the headlines and want to know more. Yeah. I'm curious because your kids are older than our children. And you mentioned they're into different things. We're kind of getting into that phase where some of our older kids want to get into different hobbies and stuff like that. What are the ages of your kids and how do you help facilitate them? Like, what are some of their hobbies and how do you facilitate those? Because sometimes that can feel a little daunting and like a full-time job too. And we're trying to navigate that.
So if you're talking about extracurriculars, I get a grade F in that. I am horrible. I didn't like him as a kid. I would much rather come home and sleep and detox socially than sign up for something. And so even the mandatory ones to graduate from high school, I found the most obscure community things I could do instead of doing things with my peers. It turns out that translated to me in motherhood. So we really have done very little. I had kids do community orchestra we did that for like 2.5 years. And then even that, I was like, this is not working for me anymore. So their hobbies are mostly at home. So we've got kids, if they show interest in gardening, great. We've built a massive garden. I've got a daughter who loves herbalism. So we've found loads of resources for her and support her cooking and making those things. If I have a kid wants to make a flip book, great. I will go get all the cards from Walmart and you can make as many flip books as your heart desires for 99 cents per 100 cards. So a lot of what they do, and then we just have brought them into our life. So our kids are very creative, but we've built a lot of our own furniture. We just have very active, creative lives. We are constantly building things. We built a rock climbing wall so that they can rock climb here at home and we didn't have to leave because they enjoy that. My husband enjoys rock climbing. So we just did it there. But then that was also a project. So I don't know. I think for better or for worse, we're just very home centric. So if they're interested in something, I find a way to do it at home, to bring it into our home, to find people or resources that we can have at our home. I am not good at leaving the house unless it's to go hiking or outside to play with other people outside.
Hey,
That's the reality.
You're speaking to the right audience here. Katie and I are that's where we want to get. That's what we want. You got 2 introverts here. They're like, how do we go out less? So it's really fun to hear the creativity that you've shown in exposing your kids to a ton of different things, but you're doing it together as a family. I don't know. To me, that sounds really awesome.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It is one of those questions though, because my oldest is turning 12 this year. And so it's starting to wonder okay, is this a personal problem or is this a healthy family trait? So there is that question that I'm starting to ask and, just ponder about it and see what comes up. We'll see how that journey ends. But yeah,
I'm sure
I don't know what the right answer is. Yeah.
I'm sure you'll adapt, especially as I feel like in the high school years, they can potentially go do things more on their own too. But I'm even there with, the little kids where I'm just I'm sorry. I know you love the social event. I don't love the social event. So we're going to mix it. do stuff at home.
Well, and I feel like in those early years, like one of the things I'm so glad we did is I invested in myself in those early years. I learned how to make shoes when they were little. I learned how to knit and crochet and make, like, I started making sourdough bread, 10 years ago. I learned how to can and I learned how, like, that's what I did when they were little. I was not taking them to kids' gym hour or whatever. And I think that was so, like, that was so good for me. And I think it was so good for our family because they got to do things with me or observe me doing things. And it just laid the foundation for what they do. I don't do those things so much now because I'm facilitating them doing them, and supporting them. And life just got bigger and more kids. And so I don't do very many things like that anymore. But I'm really glad I spent the early years doing that because it just opened the world to them. And I don't know that they would be so creative if I hadn't tried so much when they were growing up.
Yeah. I mean, I think okay, go back to the 1800s. Not that those were like the glory years, but it's like, okay, when Ma was doing something, the girls were like learning a ton. And I feel like it would seem comical to be like, okay, I'm going to pack you up and go take you to,
Gym hour.
Yeah, gym hour. Like when you said that, like, it's just so funny. Like kids used to learn alongside their parents or their tutors or whoever it was, like adults basically, and learn how to be an adult instead of things always being catered to them. And like you said, I think it could open their mind to so many more things than something that's being, boiled down to their age level or something like that. So that's great advice.
And I also, the old adage, more is caught than is taught, but I do want my children to witness me learning new things and getting excited about new things. And then I want to bring them in to it. So you mentioned, gardening, and you mentioned building the rock climbing wall, or you mentioned
trying chickens next.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know how you feel, but I like doing things, and I want my children to see me enjoying doing things. And I'm not saying I want my children to be around peers as well, and to to have friends and stuff like that. But oftentimes those play activities or those structured times that you're going to don't necessarily facilitate the parents' involvement that much. It's like the parents, the kids go and they do the activity, and the parents kind of sit around and mingle and talk. And again, I'm not saying that you should never do that, but I really like it when my kids get to see me doing something and then they get to do it with me. And it just sounds like you've been able to do that with your children, which is really inspiring.
Well, and I think the other like big instigator for us too is if we have one kid taking all the bandwidth doing one thing, what does that leave the rest of us doing? And does it bring us all down? And I don't think we found a way to thrive as a family while like catering to one or two children in the way that I feel good about yet. We just don't have the systems where we have found that to be successful. And so I would much rather do a little bit less and all do better than kill ourselves, or like have my kids witness me being like crazy because I'm running them around and then they get the worst of me, even though they got to go do something that they like.
Yeah. Yep. That's good. Thinking of that balance. So Jessica, let our listeners know where they can find you, where they can listen to the podcast, where they can sign up for the wait list, your planners, all that stuff that's available. We want them to know that. We're really excited that you are a contributor to our first magazine, which, man, we have been on the phone going back and forth with this whole shipping thing. It should be any day now. They should be shipping out. But we are just honored to have you write in the magazine. So thank you for contributing in that. And can you let our listeners know where else they could find you?
Yeah, if you just go to thrivinginmotherhoodpodcast.com, it will take you to the podcast. It's a video, like you can watch it on YouTube or listen to it anywhere. And all of my resources are just linked there.
You're so simple. You've made it easy.
I try.
And it is fun. Like you said, you've built out quite a robust selection of products over the last, would you say 8 years? Is that kind of?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
8 years. And that's really cool because, it's like you've got free products over there. You've got various price points. And so it's really, really cool. We can just encourage anybody and everybody to go over there. I think there's going to be something for everybody right now. So yeah, thank you so much for all the work that you've done and just encouraging mothers and households and families. It's a huge blessing to us. And I know it's a blessing to many other families as well. Thank you for talking with us.
Oh, and thank you for the opportunity. And thanks for being a huge encouragement and influence in my life over the last, I don't know, at least 5 years. You were on the podcast a couple years ago, Katie. So I've learned a lot from you and I appreciate all that you guys do in the world as well.